Now it's time to go over the mechanical restoration of my show. After picking up the show in November of 2019, I had to leave them in storage and was unable to test them for over a month. Luckily, in late December I had some time to work on the characters. I had to get new O-rings and connect the quick disconnects on the characters to their valve banks. The valves had been stored separately from the characters in a box. I started airing them up one by one. Rolf was in pretty good condition mechanically. Everything worked. However, it appeared as though when Rolf was removed from the stage in 1986, they rocked him back and forth until his aluminum feet broke off. This had to be fixed, so I took off his torso and took his legs to be re-welded. I had them add an additional support to the feet so they would not break off in the future. Nearly 3 years later, when I finally put Rolf on the stage, I had to rebuild all of his valves, as there were a lot of issues with sticking. A few cylinders such as Earl's mouth and arm twist also had to be rebuilt. For aesthetic reasons, I replaced his eyes as they had yellowed over time. Duke may have been the worst mechanically of all the characters. His right arm swing had become severely wallowed, and the bushings had to be drilled out and replaced. His left forearm had to be entirely replaced due to severe damage caused by a loose threaded rod. Both of his ear cylinders and ear levers had to be replaced. His eyes were also replaced, like Rolf. Duke was another character that needed to have a lot of cylinders rebuilt once he got put on the stage. His mouth, arm swing, and forearm cylinders all had to be rebuilt. Lastly, he got new arm ducts. Fats appeared to work perfectly. When he was aired up, all movements functioned with no leaks or issues. However, the more I ran him, the more issues started to develop. In the end, I had to rebuild every single cylinder, and a number of them actually had to be replaced. One way I've determined whether or not a cylinder needs to be replaced is by looking at the anodization inside the cylinder. If it's wearing away, the cylinder likely needs to be replaced, as even replacing the seals will not prevent an internal leak. His valves stuck the most of any character. They all had to be rebuilt, and like Rolf and Duke, his eyes were replaced. Unlike the other characters, I had to repair his body shells as they were cracked in 2 places. Beach Bear had a lot of issues with his guitar mechanism. There was stress on the rod of the cylinder, so I sent this away to my friend Robbie to be fixed. He had to bend the guitar mechanism back into place. Also, one of the tabs in his body frame had been broken off during the showbiz days and was never fixed. This needed to be re-welded. Many cylinders had to be rebuilt, like his mouth, arm raise, arm twist, body lean, guitar slide, and leg kick. Mitzi had a number of issues. The ear lever holders on her head frame were severely wallowed. Luckily, Creative Engineering had new ear lever holders, so I didn't have to replace the entire head frame. Robbie re-welded new ear lever holders on. I rebuilt all the cylinders in her head and most of the cylinders in her body. Both the eye and the ear cylinders had to be replaced, and I had to give her new arm ducts. Like the rest of the characters, she got new eyes. Spontaneously, I began having issues with her body lean cylinder. It had to be replaced due to internal leaks and scraping inside the cylinder. Billy Bob required a reasonable amount of work, but not too much. His foot tap lever broke off, and this was re-welded. Multiple cylinders were rebuilt, such as his mouth, arm raise, arm twist, and head turn cylinders. His eyes were also replaced. Other than cleaning melted latex off his head frame, Looney Bird checked out. I did have to rebuild his telematic cylinder for his lift mechanism, but other than that, he was in great shape. The prop characters such as the Sun, Moon, and Spider all needed their telematic cylinders rebuilt due to leaks, and luckily, Choo Choo did not require any work. This is one of the elements of the project I filmed the least. A lot of rebuilding occurred close to the time I finished the show, and I was somewhat impatient and didn't want to have to film the rebuilding of every cylinder, especially when I've shown how they are rebuilt in previous videos. This aspect of the restoration was important and integral to have a fully functioning show. I would estimate that months alone were spent on just this aspect of the restoration. However, I am lucky to have gotten characters that worked as well as these ones. Though they required a lot of work, I have had to work on far worse. My most difficult restoration was a Billy Bob from Circus Pizza, which was left outside for many years. Removing rusted bolts, cylinders, and rods was a horrible process, but the end result was satisfying. I did not have to deal with much of that with my show. These characters were really built like tanks.